All right, guys, listen. Today we're talking about something that almost doesn't seem real because Francis Ngannou isn't just a fighter, he's a freak of nature. I mean, this man grew up in Cameroon, working in sand mines as a kid, carrying heavy loads day in and day out, building raw, insane strength before he even knew what MMA was. And when you see him in the octagon, it's like watching a superhero who somehow slipped into our world. The power this guy generates with a single punch, it's not just dangerous, it's terrifying. We're talking about the hardest recorded punch in UFC history, literally measured as the equivalent of a Ford Escort hitting you at full speed. Think about that. You're not supposed to survive that kind of power, yet Francis throws it with precision, with timing, with technique. And it's not just his knockouts, it's the aura. Fighters standing across from him know they're one mistake away from being completely shut off, and that's what makes him so damn dangerous. He embodies everything primal about fighting: size, speed, and raw, God-given power sharpened with discipline and years of struggle. This isn't just a fighter, this is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of athlete who makes even world-class heavyweights look human, and that's what blows my mind every time I see him fight. But here's the thing, man, when you talk about Francis Ngannou, you can't just talk about power, you have to talk about the story, because that's what makes him so damn fascinating. This guy left Cameroon with literally nothing. He crossed borders illegally, he slept homeless on the streets of Paris, and all he had was this dream, this insane belief that he could one day fight in the UFC. And when you see him now, this giant with tree trunks for arms knocking people unconscious, you realize the monster wasn't just built in the gym, it was built through hardship, through pain, through suffering, and every single punch he throws carries the weight of that journey. Remember his early fights in the UFC? He walked through guys like Andrei Arlovsky and Alistair Overeem, and that knockout of Overeem, dude, that wasn't just a knockout, that was like a video game finishing move, one of the most brutal uppercuts you'll ever see, and Joe Rogan literally lost his mind calling it. But the crazy part is, even with all that hype, Ngannou hit a wall against Stipe Miocic the first time they fought. He got dominated, taken down again and again, completely exposed in his wrestling, and people started saying, oh, he's just another heavy hitter. Once you take him down, he's done. But what separates legends from flashes in the pan is what they do after defeat. Francis went back, he worked on his takedown defense, he sharpened his patience, he built his cardio, and when he came back for that rematch at UFC 260, man, that was a different Ngannou. A complete fight. He stuffed Stipe's shots, he stayed composed, and then boom, he knocked out the heavyweight GOAT and became the champion of the world. That's when everybody realized this wasn't just a guy with power, this was the baddest man on the planet. And the scary, even the champs knew they had a ticking time bomb in front of them, because you can't train for someone like Ngannou. You can work on defense, you can study his tape, but all it takes is one clean shot and your night is over. Fighters have said it themselves, when Francis touches you, your whole body just shuts down. That's why Dana White called him the scariest heavyweight in UFC history, and honestly, he might be the scariest fighter, period. But here's where the story of Francis Ngannou gets even crazier, man, because it wasn't just about being the UFC Heavyweight Champion, it became about something way bigger, something about freedom, about respect, about fighters knowing their worth. See, Francis wasn't just fighting in the octagon, he was fighting behind the scenes with the UFC over his contract. He wanted health insurance for fighters, he wanted the ability to box outside the UFC, he wanted fair pay, and most guys, they don't even bring these things up because they're scared of losing their spot. But Francis, he stood his ground. Imagine that, the scariest heavyweight in the world, the most powerful puncher ever measured, standing toe-to-toe with the UFC brass and saying, no, I'm not going to sign unless I get what I deserve. That's unheard of, dude. And people thought he was insane. They thought he was throwing his career away, because leaving the UFC as the champion, that never happens. But Francis took that risk, he bet on himself, and he walked away holding all the cards. Then comes the Tyson Fury fight, man. If you ever want to see what belief in yourself looks like, watch that. Everyone was saying he's going to get embarrassed, he doesn't stand a chance against the lineal heavyweight boxing champion, and then what happened? He drops Fury with a left hook and nearly pulls off one of the biggest upsets in combat sports history. Even though the judges gave Fury the decision, the whole world looked at Ngannou differently after that. He proved he wasn't just a UFC knockout artist, he was a real fighter, a warrior who could cross into another sport and still hold his own against the very best. And think about the psychology of that, man. This is a guy who was homeless in Paris, who was digging sand mines as a kid in Cameroon, and now he's standing toe-to-toe with Tyson Fury in Saudi Arabia with the whole world watching. That's not just power, that's destiny. And it didn't stop there. He signs with PFL. He secures one of the best contracts in MMA history, not just for himself, but opening doors for other fighters to have leverage. He's fighting for opportunity. He's fighting for legacy. He's fighting to prove that you don't have to be trapped under the old system if you've got the courage to break free. And honestly, that's what makes Francis Ngannou so damn powerful. Yeah, his punches can shut off your brain in a second, but it's his mind, his willpower, his refusal to be broken by life or by the fight game that makes him a legend. Because at the end of the day, you can teach someone technique, you can train strength, but you can't train that kind of heart, that kind of unshakable belief. Francis Ngannou is living proof that when you combine physical power with mental toughness, you get something the world has never seen before. And now, man, when you talk about Francis Ngannou's future, it's almost like we're talking about a comic book character, because this guy's story is still being written. The crazy part is, even after leaving the UFC, the hype around him didn't die down, it exploded. Everyone wanted to see what Francis would do next, and the possibilities were insane. Think about it, Jon Jones versus Ngannou. That's the fight fans dreamed about for years. The two most dangerous heavyweights alive clashing for the title of the baddest man on the planet. Didn't happen in the UFC, but the demand for it, still massive. Then you've got the boxing world, and people aren't done talking about Ngannou there either. Rematch with Tyson Fury, a showdown with Anthony Joshua, even talk of Deontay Wilder crossing into MMA to face Ngannou. Man, that's the stuff fight fans fantasize about, these larger-than-life collisions where every punch feels like the world might shake. But here's what really makes Francis different, and why I keep saying he's so damn powerful. He's not just chasing fights, he's building a legacy. He's using his position to lift up other fighters, to create a system where guys get fair pay, where they're not locked into contracts that control every move of their careers. You don't usually hear that from heavyweights, dude. Most guys, once they make it, they only care about themselves. But Francis, he's thinking about the sport, about changing it from the inside out. That's leadership, that's vision. And then when you look at the symbolism of his story, man, it blows your mind. This kid who was literally working in sand mines, who had to escape across continents, sleeping in parking lots, risking his life just to get a shot, now standing as one of the most influential fighters in the entire world. It's like he's carrying the weight of every underdog who ever dreamed of breaking free from the chains of their situation. And that's why when you watch Francis fight, it's not just a guy swinging for knockouts, it's the energy of a lifetime of struggle, of survival, of proving everyone wrong, compressed into a single punch. And let me tell you, when that kind of man steps into a ring or a cage, you're not just watching a fight, you're watching a force of nature. You're watching destiny unfold in real time. Whether it's boxing, MMA, or even some fight we can't imagine yet, Francis Ngannou has already proven he's not just the scariest puncher in the world, he's one of the most inspiring human beings to ever step into combat sports. And you gotta ask yourself, how far can this story go? Because if the past has taught us anything, it's that every time people doubt Francis Ngannou, he turns around and shocks the entire world. And I don't think he's done shocking us yet. Here's the thing, man. When we talk about Francis Ngannou, we're not just talking about a fighter anymore. We're talking about a myth, a living legend in the making. Every sport has those once-in-a-generation figures who completely redefine what's possible. In boxing, it was Mike Tyson with that insane knockout power and aura of fear. In MMA, we had Anderson Silva with his artistry, Khabib with his dominance. But Francis is the one who carries that raw primal power, that sense of danger where people tune in not just to see if he wins, but to see if he does the impossible again. And the craziest part, he's still evolving. This isn't a guy who peaked years ago. This is a man still sharpening his tools, still adding layers to his game. And when you combine that with the mindset he's built from his insane journey, the hunger, the resilience, the unbreakable will, it creates a fighter who feels less like an athlete and more like a force of destiny. Think about it. Millions of people across the world who may never throw a punch in their lives look at Francis and see hope. They see proof that even when life stacks every card against you, when you're buried in struggle, when people laugh at your dreams, you can rise up, you can fight back, and you can change everything with your own two hands. That's why I keep saying he's not just dangerous inside the cage, he's dangerous because of what he represents outside of it. He represents the idea that nothing can stop you if you refuse to break. And as much as fans debate over what's next, Jon Jones, Tyson Fury rematch, Anthony Joshua, or even some new frontier we haven't seen yet. The real truth is Francis Ngannou has already won. He's already cemented his name in history. Every punch he throws from here on out is just adding to the legend. And that's what makes this story so damn powerful, man. Because one day when we look back at this era of combat sports, we're not just going to say Francis Ngannou was a champion, we're going to say he was a move. He was proof that impossible is just a word. And that, my friends, is why Francis Ngannou will forever be remembered, not just as one of the most dangerous heavyweights alive, but as a symbol of human perseverance, a giant who walked among men. That's the story, that's the legacy, and that's why the world will never forget the name Francis Ngannou. And listen, man, here's what people don't always understand. When you're looking at Francis Ngannou, you're not just looking at a heavyweight fighter, you're staring into the reality of what human beings are capable of when nothing in this world can break their will. Think about his story again. The way he carried himself out of Cameroon, across deserts, starving, nearly losing his life just chasing a dream that everyone told him was impossible, and now look at him standing in front of millions with the entire combat sports world, knowing that one swing of his arm could change everything. That's why I say when Francis steps into the cage, it's not just a fight, it's an event, it's a cultural moment. The man brings a kind of energy that reminds us of the ancient gladiators, where crowds didn't just come to see technique, they came to see power, dominance, the raw essence of survival. Francis represents that. And here's the beauty of it. He's not just this monster throwing hands, he's a man who speaks softly, humbly, carries himself with dignity, but inside him is a fire that never goes out, that balance between humility and ferocity, that's rare. And when you hear him talk, you realize he's not fighting just for himself, he's fighting for his family, for his country, for every single kid out there who's told they can't make it. That's why the world connects with him. That's why even when he walked away from the UFC, people didn't hate him for it, they respected it, because Francis stood up for himself in a way fighters rarely do. He bet on himself, and he proved he was right. That takes courage beyond the cage, that takes the kind of strength that only legends have. And when I think about his legacy, man, it's not just about the knockouts, though those are insane, it's about how he shifted the narrative. He showed fighters that they don't have to be trapped by the system, that they can carve their own path, that they can stand tall against the machine and still come out victorious. That's a kind of power even scarier than his fists, and maybe that's why the aura around Francis keeps growing. Because yes, he's dangerous physically, but spiritually, symbolically, he's unstoppable. He's not just a fighter, he's a reminder that when you refuse to back down, the world has no choice but to remember your name. And here's the thing, man, when you look at Francis Ngannou's journey in its entirety, it almost feels like something out of mythology, like the kind of stories our ancestors used to tell around campfires, about giants, warriors, men who weren't just strong physically, but carried the spirit of survival. That's Francis. He wasn't handed anything, not opportunities, not safety, not even basic resources, and yet he turned every disadvantage into fuel. That's why when you see him in the octagon, there's this tension, this silence before he throws a punch, because everyone knows that punch could end everything in a fraction of a second. But here's the deeper layer that people miss. Ngannou isn't just dangerous because of his knockout power, he's dangerous because of what he represents. The undeniable truth that the human spirit, when it refuses to break, can defy every odd stacked against it. Think about it. He worked in sand mines as a kid. He crossed deserts and oceans, just to chase the impossible. He slept homeless in the streets of Paris, and still he never gave up. That kind of resilience builds a monster inside you, but a controlled monster, a force that knows when to wait, when to strike, and when to rise. And the world felt that the night he knocked out Stipe Miocic to become heavyweight champion. In that moment, every hardship, every night he doubted himself was erased, and he stood there holding the belt, not just as a fighter but as living proof that no matter where you start, you can finish as a king. And here's where it gets even crazier. Even after reaching the mountaintop, he wasn't satisfied. He wasn't content with just being called champion. He wanted respect, freedom, and a voice in a system that rarely gives fighters any. Most guys fold under that pressure. They take the safe route, they compromise, but Francis walked away from the most powerful organization in MMA, with the world doubting him, and he still came out on top. That takes more than strength, that takes vision, and it's why even outside the UFC, his name carries weight. People tune in not just to watch Ngannou fight, but to watch him exist, because he embodies the fight that lives inside all of us.
the fight to be heard, the fight to stand tall, the fight to create your own destiny. And honestly, when you put him in the cage, you're not just dealing with a heavyweight, you're dealing with a story, a symbol, an unstoppable presence that makes even the toughest men hesitate. That's why guys respect him, that's why fans worship him, and that's why when you talk about the scariest heavyweights to ever walk the planet, you can't have that conversation without Francis Ngannou. Because his danger isn't just in the fists that can shut the lights out, it's in the life that forged those fists, the mindset that refuses to quit, and the spirit that turned pain into power. That's Francis. That's why every time his name is mentioned, people don't just talk about a fighter, they talk about a legend in the making.